You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. In a program ranging from the 18th century through to the present day, the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra welcomes back renowned French hornist James Somerville to play conduct in their second-to-last Spring Series concert. Music of Mozart, Brahms, Respighi, and a co-commission of Canadian composer Kati Agócs, specially written for the brilliant player. And to hear more, I'm joined by Kati now. Hello and welcome to Winnipeg's Classic 107.
Hello, Simon. Great to be here.
And what a pleasure it is to have you in Winnipeg. Let me begin by asking you, when's the last time you were in town?
Around 2015. I've worked a few times with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra.
Mm-hmm. And the New Music Festival.
Yes.
And yeah, so it has been quite some time, and this concert, the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra concert, is going to be presented twice, and we're connecting ahead of the first of those performances. So would you mind telling us a little bit about how you're feeling going into tonight's concert? This is the first time we're hearing this work in full in Winnipeg.
I'm just so excited about these two concerts. The orchestra sounding fantastic, and James is sounding exquisite on the solo part, and it's all coming together beautifully. And the venue is also really, really beautiful. Great sound and very intimate space.
Yeah, Westminster Church is lovely for that. Yeah. It really does have such a wonderful sound, such a resonant space. So I'm so glad that you could be here for that, and no surprise to hear that the orchestra and especially James are sounding so wonderful. I know by its definition, a premiere can only happen once, but I feel like we add qualifiers. You know, we say a Canadian premiere or an American premiere or an in-person premiere or a digital premiere. This is a co-commission between the MCO and 4 other orchestras, and this is a work that was teased to us online in the MCO last year and then received its in-person premiere in Sioux City, Iowa in November of 2021. Is this the Canadian premiere of this horn concerto? Do we have that honor?
So unfortunately, no. So another orchestra you do that, and so it is not the Canadian premiere. However, what you said is correct in that we did do a sort of teaser. We got together with all the pandemic delays. The orchestra premiere was delayed, so we got together. I created a piano reduction, and we did this sort of informal recording, which we shared little clips with your audiences. So I think some people will be a bit familiar with the work, and it'll obviously be great to share the fully orchestrated version tonight.
I'm so glad that other people are hearing it, and yes, we do have that little premiere, that digital premiere that we had, and we'll call it the prairie premiere here in Manitoba. How about that?
Yes, that is accurate. You can call it the prairie premiere, unless Sioux City is technically no. I guess not.
Midwest, I guess. We'll go with it. We'll take it. We'll take the prairie premiere. So this is a work that you specifically wrote for James Somerville, a great French horn player, conductor, and like yourself, also a Canadian who makes home in Boston. You both work at the New England Conservatory. I'm curious, when did you first get to know each other? Was it when you came on faculty at New England Conservatory in 2008? Yeah,
I believe it was around 2008, and James was music director of the Hamilton Philharmonic, and they commissioned me and did my music a couple of times. And I also wrote a piece for the Boston Symphony Orchestra chamber players to celebrate their 50th anniversary, which featured the horn. So we've collaborated a few times in different on different kinds of works with different orchestras.
I mean, you mentioned the work that you wrote for the BPO chamber players, made up of principals of the Boston Symphony, and previous to that, working with the Hamilton Philharmonic. What is so special about James playing?
Well, he's got a very effortless high register and a very pure sound, and these are features which are pretty rare, I think, in horn playing, and he just has such beautiful natural phrasing too, and that's something that I took advantage of in this piece. Each of the movements features the horn, different facets of the horn, I would say, in different ways. It's quite virtuosic, but there is a lot of lyrical playing in the horn. Obviously, he plays high horn in the Boston Symphony, and that the first horn parts tend to lie higher, and I was taking advantage of that kind of writing in the piece to really showcase his playing.
You talk about his lyrical ability and his phrasing. Does that really ring true to you? Because you're a singer, right? That was your instrument of choice first before composing, or sort of happening around the same time. Is that why it resonates with you when you think about that lyrical quality to his playing in a really special sort of way?
Yeah, I think that's why it resonates with me. I mean, I was a church musician for many years as a soprano, and I do have a vocal background, as you say, and I think and whenever there's melody line present, my music tends to feature a lot of melody. That's sort of like one of the hallmarks of my style, I would say. Like, and whenever you're featuring a solo instrument that way melodically, it's always helpful, I think, to think of the lines as vocal impulses, and that's sort of how I go about working on a piece like this.
Let's chat a little bit more about that background and then how it materializes in the music. You mentioned being a church musician and singing as a soprano. Your background is Hungarian, of Hungarian descent. You're down in the States now. You're Juilliard educated. You studied with none other than Milton Babbitt, a trailblazing composer. Yes. Kati, I feel like there could be a lot of influences there. How do you characterize the music that you write?
Well, the music that I write tends to be quite emotionally direct and transparent, and I think being alive now, there's so many influences in general for all of us, and it's so easy to have access to music from all over the globe, that's being written every second. So, and you're right, I do have a lot of international influences. My dad left Hungary in 1956 after the uprising and moved to the States, and my mom was American, but they moved to Canada. And I was born in Canada, and I feel like it's more important not to sort of focus on one aspect of those external influences, but instead to just have the music speak really, really directly from the heart, and speak to audiences, and be something that audiences of all different kinds can find approachable and find something to relate to and I found that to be the case with this piece, and so I'm really excited to share it with audiences, even when people are hearing it for the first time, they've had a really strong reaction to it. So
can you tell us more about that strong reaction, in what way?
Well, I think like the language of this piece is not is something that one can understand on a first hearing. So I've had audience members be very moved by it, and I mean that's an honor for me, because when you're presenting a work for the first time, it's like you don't know what the reaction is going to be. So to have audiences connect with it right away is really rewarding.
This is a work that is going to be played alongside another horn concerto by Mozart. And I mean, you're talking about sort of accessibility to the music that you write. And I think there's a real accessibility in this entire program. I mean, there's Mozart, there's Brahms, and there's music of Ottorino Respighi that James gets to kind of conduct. How do you feel like that program helps sort of ground the work that you've put together here? And how does it play into that companion piece that is the Mozart?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that it's not, my music is quite complex too. Yeah. It's sort of like, it's about connecting with it initially, and then there are lots of layers, right? So one of the musical relationships that's really interesting on this program is the connection between my horn concerto and Mozart's horn concerto in E flat K447, number 3, which has a similar instrumentation. It's actually where we got the instrumentation for my piece, because it's scored for 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, and strings, and that's pretty rare for Mozart. Normally he uses oboes in his horn concerto. So that dark tone color is already a sort of unique starting point. But then I also I extended the range lower with the addition of bass clarinet and contrabassoon, which only appear in the 3rd movement. So you get these special, these dark colors that you don't normally hear soloistically in the orchestra. You know, there's like bass clarinet solos, contrabassoon solos, and that, of course, the dialogue of those instruments with the solo horn is interesting, and timbrally fascinating. So I think it's that feeling of like extending, like taking the Mozart sound world, but then extending it timbrally. And then also in terms of a harmonic language, I sort of use non-functional harmony, and I sort of embed these like fanfare-like gestures that come from like the hunting horn tradition, which Mozart was also tapping into, but I sort of embed them in this non-functional harmony that acts like a bit differently than you might expect, and brings us to unexpected places harmonically. And then in the 2nd movement, which is like the lyrical slow movement, I have these layers of like almost like Charles Ives like gauzy textures over the more straightforward lines. And then in the 3rd movement, where we have the dark woodwind colors showcased, I also use an effect in the horn, which is stopped horn, which is like a metallic type sound when they insert the horn player inserts either a hand into the bell or a mute into the bell, and gets this special that is almost thinner, but it's also very resonant, sort of buzzy metallic sound. But I also combine that with glissando, which is slide between different pitches, or as horn players talk about it, rips. So I sort of do these like stopped glissando effects, and so it really like opens up into this other world that you know is my own world. So it's not really derivative of the Mozart. It's more like I'm very interested in that musical relationship where it's not a derivative like offshoot. It's more like a dialogue with that piece.
Yeah, it's
instrumentation as a starting point.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, there's a sort of familial relationship there, but we're not talking about brothers and sisters. We're talking about second cousins kind of thing, and you're really bringing it down the family pedigree, down the family line.
Yeah, I don't know how many generations that would be between the 21st century, but that would be interesting to figure out. But yes, definitely. I think that's a great way to think about it.
And I mean, you talk about what is required not only of the orchestra, but also of James as the soloist. And this is a concert in which he is not only going to be playing, but also be conducting. I imagine he'll be leading from soloist position in your work too?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, really amazing, because there's such an incredible tradition of that. I mean, in Mozart's time, it was normal for the soloist in a concerto to lead from the performance position, whether it be like piano, violin. I mean, the horn concertos were maybe a bit more rare, but all the way up through the Romantic period, that was normal. And then the pieces got a bit more complex and the orchestra got bigger, so it made sense to have someone, you know, waving a stick in front of the orchestra and to separate out those two roles. But I think it's really wonderful to be returning to that. And there's something like so organic about those two roles being integrated. And I think that works really well for my piece.
Well, and I think we here in Winnipeg are going to be lucky to hear it. Kati,
thank you so much.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us at Classic 107 today. The Prairie premiere of your work happens tonight and again tomorrow. And so 2 chances for audiences to check out the show. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yes, and I believe that there will be a live stream.
Not
live stream, but there will be a stream in the works.
And they're beautifully produced. I don't know if you've seen any of the previous MCO streams, but they are beautifully produced. So I mean, again, if people can't be there in person, yes, you can also check it out digitally as well. All sorts of ways to connect with the MCO, with your music, with the playing of James Somerville. Kati, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, Simon, and thank you as well.